Having a real monitor like this one that I could connect to my Commodore 64 was a dream for me when I was a kid. And here I am 40 years later, wishing I had a proper monitor to connect to my little C64 Mini here. Well, I'm done wishing, and I'm going to build one. And I'm going to show you how you can build one too. Hello and welcome to Operation 8-Bit. I'm your host Tony Landy, and as usual over there behind the camera we have Sparky making sarcastic comments. For those of you who are new to our channel, keep an eye out for those. They pop up from time to time and they look something like this. Back in the day, it was pretty common for most of us to hook up our computers to a regular TV like this one. And a lot of that had to do with the simple fact that dedicated computer monitors were really expensive. But every month, as we would flip through the pages of a magazine, reading up on the latest games and looking for sample programs to write, we would be teased with full-page color ads like this one, showing off a beautiful monitor that perfectly matched the style of our beloved Commodore 64. It was the holy grail setup, and if you had all of this, you were definitely the coolest nerd in the neighborhood. Manufactured by JVC, the Commodore 1701 was released in 1983, followed by the 1702 a year later. They retailed for about $249, which is equivalent to about $700 today. The main difference between the two models is that the 1702 has a switching power supply, and the 1701 has a traditional power supply. This means that this 1702 is lighter and more efficient when it comes to power usage. The monitor had a single mono speaker positioned here, so the sound quality wasn't the best. So what made this monitor so desirable? The video quality. Early home computers were designed to connect to TVs using an RF output and would come with a little switch box like this one that would let you swap between the signal from your computer and the signal from broadcast television. This worked, but the picture quality wasn't always the best. Most PCs at the time also offered a composite video option that would give you a better image, provided, of course, the TV you had could accept that type of input. The 1702 took this a step further by adding a connection that was an early form of S-video, which would split the luma and chroma signals and created an even better picture than the composite video option. Nowadays, HDMI is pretty much the standard. And even a cheap secondhand TV like this one can produce a great quality picture for playing retro games on systems like our little C64 Mini here. But it feels like something's missing. Sure, the picture quality is really good and the audio is much better than that old 1702. But just like when I was a kid, I would really love to have a monitor that would match the look and feel of this computer. But unfortunately, it simply doesn't exist. So I'm just going to make my own.
Oh, no room for Bender, huh? Fine. I'll go build my own lunar lander with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the lunar lander and the blackjack. Screw the whole thing.
Now, before I show you how we turn this dream into a reality, this is the part of the video where I ask you to please click that subscribe button. Okay, let's start by jumping over to Fusion 360 and taking a look at all of the parts that I designed. There are a total of 6 parts, starting with the bezel that will hold an 8-inch LCD display, followed by the front cover that fits over that, the main case, a speaker panel up here on top, and the back of the case to finish it all out. What we wound up with is a 57% scale replica of a real 1702 monitor, and I think I did a decent job of capturing a lot of the small details. For For this project, we want to use the control panel from the display that we bought. So what I've done here is to create the openings for these buttons in the same spot where the adjustment dials are in the real monitor. I'm sure that some of my more observant viewers have already noticed that there is something missing from this part of the design. The little door that covers over the controls. I tried a few times to get that working, but the little hinge clips kept breaking when I tried to snap the door into place. I did start working on a variation that used magnets, but I never finished it, so we'll just leave that for a project at another time. I did, however, design the case so that we can plug in RCA jacks into the front just like the original. Each of the body components is designed so that they fit together in a way that'll make everything easy to assemble once it's all printed. If I spin this around to the back view and zoom in a bit, and take away the speaker cover, you can get a better idea of what that looks like. You can also see how I did this for the front of the case, where I added these corner bits that key into the case. Okay, so now the fun part. We're going to fire up our Ender 3 Pro and get to printing all the parts. Before we can print any of our models, the first thing we need to do is bring each of the STL files into a slicer program. A slicer is a utility that converts 3D models into instructions that the printer will understand to build the object. Now, sometimes getting these settings right is more of an art than a science. For example, let's take a look at the monitor frame. If I slice this face up, we're going to need a lot of support underneath the control panel. Remember, the printer can't just extrude material into thin air, so each new layer needs to have a layer underneath to support it. Printing supports adds extra time, and all of that material is waste that winds up getting tossed into the recycling bin. Also, when you remove the supports from the body of whatever you printed, it normally leaves a rougher finish. Now, if I flip this part over and reslice it, you can see that we'll shave off 2 hours from the print time because there are less supports. But the supports we do have are right underneath the bezel, so that part is going to look a little ragged, and it's going to be really hard to get the material off this section here where the monitor badge is going to be. So even though it will take longer and I'm going to have more waste, I'm actually going to print this part face up. For the front of the case, that was a relatively easy decision. But for the back of the monitor, that's a totally different story. This thing is basically a big hollow shell, and whether it's face up or face down, it needs a lot of support. Now, I played around with the settings and finally got it to a place where the quality would be decent and the waste would be minimized. But even with all that, it still came out to about 3 days of printing for this one piece alone. To make matters even worse, I was halfway through the print when my friend Garth over at 3D Print Direct told me that if I tilted the thing back 45 degrees, I could cut the time and the waste by over half. It was too late by that point to stop the print I already had running, and printing a part this size at that angle poses its own unique set of challenges, so I just went with what we had. After each of the parts is sliced, we need to load the G-code files onto the printer. For this, I connected a Raspberry Pi running Octoprint to my Ender 3 Pro, so I can just drag and drop the files over as I need them. This is a lot easier than copying them onto an SD card and sneaker netting them over. Plus, it also allows me to monitor the print job remotely. I used a black PLA for the bezel and the back of the case, and what was supposed to be a khaki color for the rest of the parts. I was hoping this color would be a closer match to the original case color, but it turned out to be a lot more orangish than I thought it would be. I really didn't want to have to paint these, but this color sucks, so yeah. We've got some new filament coming in from another vendor that is supposed to be a dead-on color match to the C64. I'm going to be doing a follow-up Nibbles and Bites episode on that, so make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it when it comes out. While we're waiting for the 3D parts to print, let's take a quick look at the rest of what we need for this build. For our display, I want that classic look and feel, so I went with this 8-inch 4x3 aspect ratio monitor. We also have this panel mount HDMI extension that will connect into the back of the case, as well as a set of RCA extensions for the front panel. Finally, I have this power extension cord that will run from the back of the case to the display. This way we don't have to have the AC adapter permanently connected to the monitor. Alright, what do you say we finally put this thing together? Look at it. Isn't it just cute as hell? I love the way it looks sitting here with my C64 Mini. I even decided to print a little monitor stand as well, so it'd be easier to run the cables underneath, just like a real one. Alright, what do you say we take this thing out for a test drive and play a few games?
Normally, we would start out with Zork, for reasons. But this time, I thought I'd switch it up just a little bit with Leather Goddesses of Phobos. I've got to say, seeing it on this screen really brings back some great memories. Aside from the fact that they are awesome, there is a reason I keep showing games from Infocom. We've got a very special episode planned for the 40th anniversary of Zork 1 that looks at the game from a totally different perspective. So if you haven't done so already, you may want to subscribe so you don't miss that one when it comes out. Okay, let's change games and test out the new speakers. I probably could have picked up some better speakers and wired in a small amp, but all in all, the sound quality isn't that bad. Winter Games is another title that I remember playing as a kid, but it dawned on me that I don't think I ever competed in all of the events. Actually, I think I usually just competed in the biathlon and maybe bobsledding.
As I mentioned earlier, the Commodore 1702 monitor is iconic. As an example, for those that are fans of the Netflix show Stranger Things, you may have noticed in Season 2 where they had an entire wall of them being used as video monitors. This build came out really nice, and I accomplished all of the goals that I had except for one. The buttons on the front wound up not working the way I expected, so I had to glue them in. Luckily, the donor display comes with this little remote control, so I can still get to the functions. Now, for those of you that want to make one of these yourselves, I've left links in the description below where you can get all of the models and parts. As an extra bonus, for those of you that don't have a 3D printer, we've teamed up with our friends over at 3D Print Direct, and they have everything set up so you can order all the case parts from them. They even have an option where you can get the main case printed in the proper color, so you don't have to paint it. Just like this little 1541 drive that I made using that color match PLA that I hinted at earlier. By the way, we'll be reviewing that in our next episode of Nibbles and Bites. Speaking of this 1541 floppy drive, we got this model from our Fractic friends over at Retro Recipes. They've been doing a series of episodes on this, and we thought it was the perfect way to round out our little mini setup here. But you know what, Sparky? This is great, but we're missing something. You know what we need? We need a printer. And guess what? I started working on one. But that's a video yet to come. If you'd like to help us get that video produced, please consider supporting us on our Patreon, or you can always just send us a tip. There's links to that below as well. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Operation 8-Bit. So I thought I would show everybody this at the end. This is all the misprints and infill and test prints that we had to do to get this project together. Now the good news is we are working on a way to get this stuff properly recycled. But yeah, you can see it doesn't always come out right the first time. In the case of this piece, it didn't come out right the first 4 times. Yeah, whoever said 3D printing was going to be a fun hobby was on crack.